This is Adam King from Aliens Don't Ring Doorbells, and you're listening to Madness to Creation.
Go ahead, say it.
Welcome to the Madness to Creation podcast, where self-care and music merge. This is Maddie. How are you? And I just kind of want to introduce myself a little bit, just in case you are not aware of the podcast. I'm a special education teacher, a mental health advocate, who happens to love music and be obsessed with music and obsessed with helping people with their mental health. And that's what the mantra, the mission statement, so to speak, in education terms, Madness to Creation podcast is all about. And I hope you enjoyed our last interview, our previous interviews with like Ray Luzier of Korn, Emily Lazar of September Morning, and people like that. And also I hope you enjoyed the most recent interview with Brandon of the Drowned God. And in this podcast, in this interview, we catch up with Cal Stamp and Mr. Paul of Record Heat, who used to be known as Spirit Animal, and we just get an interesting discussion about the ups and downs in the music industry, and their three-song EP that they released entitled One, like the number one, that they released on March 12th, and we also have just an amazing discussion about mental health, soundtrack to their life, and how the music industry impacted their mental health through like the name change from Spirit Animal to Record Heat and so on and so forth. This band, I'll be honest with you, is one of the catchiest bands I ever heard in my life. It's just, they mix just so many elements of their music. They have like little pop ditties that get in your ear hole, and it is so infectious that you can't help but hum along to their music. And on a personal note, I remember seeing Spirit Animal, who, when they were Spirit Animal, obviously, open for Dorothy up at the Varsity Theater in Minneapolis. And I'll tell you what, my eyes and ears were glued to their sound. The way that they engaged with their audience and the way that they just really brought it live showed me that this group was going to be the real deal. And then I learned that they've opened pretty frequently for Theory, or Theory of a Dead Man, whatever you want to call them, and for Fits and the Tantrums as well. And I'm expecting big things from Record Heat and everything like that, and I'm expecting you to check out their singles entitled Network, Nathan, and Just Hits. And it's really just like a little concept EP that kind of talks about what they went through in the ups and downs of the music business. And I don't want to say it feels like they're starting over, but it's more of a rebranding. And naturally, that is so important for our mental health, that we learn how to rebrand ourselves, to reinvent ourselves and everything like that. And I decided, I'm just going to bring my personal stories and also just bring my expertise in education and in mental health to help impact the listeners. And I hope that there is some type of impact as well. And I know that it's just so cool just hearing about the responses and everything like that. And if you want to check out this podcast, I would be so grateful that if you checked it out on Spotify, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Spreaker, JioSaavn, YouTube, and Google Podcasts, and along with Podchaser and Podcast Addict. And also, please check out Record Heat at Record Heat US on Instagram and Twitter. And I want to say that you might have to type in Spirit Animal in order to follow them, because as they said, Facebook is a bunch of jerks, for lack of a better term. And I want to thank you guys so much for listening. And we will have a legendary Canadian progressive rock band Saga up next, along with a TikTok sensation named Marcy Whitehurst. And if you want to be on this podcast, I'm also going to have a series, just everyday stories, extraordinary stories from everyday people. I would love to have you on here. And just email us at madnesscreation@gmail.com, and also follow us on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram at Madness Creation, and also follow us on Twitter at MTC Madness. I want to hear from you. I want to engage with the world digitally, and I want to connect with you personally. So thank you so much for listening, and take it away, Cal and Paul. All right, welcome to the Madness to Creation podcast, where self-care and music merge. This is Maddie. How are you? On the on Zoom with me, I have Cal and Paul from Record Heat, and I'm excited to have them on. They're naturally one of the catchiest bands I've ever heard in my life, so their music is infectious and so much fun. So, Cal, how are you doing? I'll have Paul introduce himself once he gets situated here. So, how are you, Cal?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Thanks for having us on here, man. It's good to be back. We talked to you a couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we just did like a phone interview and stuff like that. So I appreciate that you remember talking to us. So thank you. That's an honor to be remembered and stuff. So, so based upon the past couple years from our conversation we had back then to now, how have you grown as musicians, so to speak?
That's an interesting question. As writers, I think that we've mentioned this. We've mentioned this a couple of times now, so I'll try not to give you the rote response, but it's true. So it bears repeating. As writers, I think we've gotten a little bit more personal. I think that that's sort of inevitable. Anytime that you spend enough time writing, especially under potentially challenging circumstances like we've all experienced over the last year, we've sort of started looking inward a little bit more for our source material. So our new EP, One, it's much more autobiographical than I think anything we've done in the past. We've been through a lot, as a band together. And it just sort of organically came out that way. We wanted to express, how we were feeling, what we've been going through, and that's kind of what the result was this new EP, One.
Yeah, absolutely. And Paul, got the question while you were getting situated. I wasn't sure if you heard the question or not. How have you grown as a musician from when we talked to you guys last couple years ago?
I think kind of we definitely have gotten kind of more comfortable in our own skins with all, we poured so hard so long, and we had so many different experiences that there's absolutely no way we could sort of reference that. I mean, it was like we had a show on the road. Yes, when you're cooped up together for that kind of long period of time. We had some stuff that we had to deal with the industry in general, large, all that sort of stuff. And so we had to do it. I mean, we had to be more cathartic. I mean, or more therapeutic, experience more catharsis, whatever you call it. And with the music itself, just because I think without acknowledging and being honest with all the stuff that had happened, I don't think music would have been that good. I don't think we could have really maybe we just can't help but be honest with each other at this point, after all we've been through.
It's the only way to survive when you're living in a van together 6 months at a time. And just so people, because I know maybe we're being a little bit vague, but it's not just the pandemic we're talking about. This personally for us, the strife predates the pandemic by quite a bit of time. We've been through a lot as a band, just in terms of DIY. We've been a DIY act, we've been an indie act, we've been a major label act, and then we've been all those things again. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Just for clarity for your listeners, so that they're not kind of scratching their heads, being like, "What do these guys mean?"
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, in terms of the pandemic, you guys have brought that up. What is for myself, the biggest thing that I've learned about myself is self-reflection, and I've also learned how to listen. I know that sounds crazy, but given the political and social civil unrest and everything like that, I've learned to listen to others when they're experiencing strife, when they're experiencing anger and stuff like that. What are, personally in you guys' lives, what's the biggest takeaway that you've learned from this pandemic? Because it's been 1 year since COVID and quarantine and the lockdown has happened.
Cal and I just talked about this one thing, and it is that we realized that those years in a van cooped up together and isolated from society for long periods of time made us uniquely adapted to the pandemic.
Yeah,
So
we
like,
were,
I
we were
think,
already here. You guys just caught up to us in lockdown.
yeah. So it's basically part of it. In terms of actual like experience, or in terms of like like the things that I've learned, I've learned that I don't mind being alone. Which is huge. I mean, you are. My jobs are basically like bartending when I was back home, or being in a van with a bunch of people and like surrounding myself with like a bunch of like things and always going and always going. Sometimes it's a scary sort of thought or situation to kind of like be put by yourself with yourself for so long, and I know that's hard for a lot of people if we're talking about like mental health issues and stuff like that. But for me, I acclimated well. I kind of like learned that I don't mind myself, which is
that's funny. My mother's now ex-boyfriend once gave me some really, really good advice. He said you got to be friends with yourself. You can't have an antagonistic relationship with yourself. And as a younger person, I wasn't that young, but I was younger. That's something I really needed to hear, and I think it's really shown itself to be true over the course of the last year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, speaking of which, being friends with yourself, we talk about it like self-care, self-love, and stuff like that. What is one, like, whether it's as a musician or whether it's in your personal characteristics, you're like, damn, I'm really freaking good at this.
Paul's really good at the pedals. Paul's great at bass pedals.
Oh man, my pedals are amazing. My pedal work.
He can't play for shit, but his
none.
pedals are on point.
Yeah.
Just kidding, Paul.
I know. What's yours, Cal?
I was so excited to rip Paul. I forgot what the question was.
Yeah.
Oh, that's all good. Basically, the question was, we talk about self-care and self-love, and what is one thing you're like, damn, I'm really freaking good at this? Like, whether it's as a musician or whether it's in your personality trait you might have.
I'll go for it, unless you need a minute.
No, I mean, like, what's one thing I'm really the thing. I know I'm good at a lot of things, guys. Here's the issue. It's hard to pick one. I learned to be better at like detail work with this thing. So like I learned that I really enjoy to a fault, and I'm really good at when I get into like producing something or like writing or whatever. I go down the rabbit hole, and I think I really enjoy doing that to an extent that I didn't think I realized. So I'm really good at going down the rabbit hole with some friggin' plugins. So that's pretty much it. Thorough.
Creatively thorough. Thoroughly creative.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, that's funny because that's a kind of a hard question to answer with any kind of specificity. But I think I would probably say something similar to Paul. I think that I discovered really through working with Spirit Animal that I have.
What band was that? What?
I'm sorry, with Record Heat. My bad. I can't believe I'm the one that did it. Oh my God. I have a lot more artistic integrity than I think I expected. I really am committed to making something honest and good pretty much every single time I go in to make something, whether it's for the record we did with Atlantic, or it's for a writing session with some guy that I know will never release the song. It's it's deeply, deeply ingrained in me to do a good job. And I think that that's a good characteristic, even if sometimes it manifests itself in prickly, unpleasant ways.
I was going to say, and this is a total compliment to Cal. Actually, I'm gonna hype Cal up here. It's like his moral sense is 100%. You do know what is right from wrong, and you voice it loudly.
I'm compromising.
yeah. So I will say that. Yeah. That is a definitely compliment.
The whole band is like that. I think that's part of our part of the reason why we are good together, and part of the reason why we butt heads sometimes. We all have a pretty strong sense of what we believe, and we believe in it. And I think that's a good thing, ultimately.
Yeah, definitely. And so speaking of which, like, you released a EP entitled One, and I gotta say, the song Networks is one of the catchiest freaking songs I've heard in a long time.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. That's what I love about Record Heat, is that the music is just fantastic. And I'll be honest with you, the first time I heard Record Heat was back when you guys are known as Spirit Animal. You guys opened for Dorothy up in Minneapolis. And I was just like, it was the most groove-tastic music I've heard in a long time. And like, how do you guys come together in the studio and just create that awesomeness, for lack of a better term?
I mean, well, it is a process. It is, like for us, like, we have stepped away, and we stepped away a long time ago from the like rehearsal space writing. So like we basically have this Dropbox of like bits and pieces and these like gems of like things. And then, one of us will usually, I mean, a lot of times a Coop, but like, one of us will like kind of like, start to kind of gestate the idea, and then we'll start passing it back and forth once it becomes some sort of thing. And then usually it's Cal and Coop get together and like start to do like the lyric part, which I fucking hate. Sorry, am I allowed to say the F word here? So yeah.
You're good.
I think we're several bombs in, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh, are we?
Pandora's box is open now, so.
yeah. It's like good. I guess there's no like whatever FEC here. Not FEC, whatever the thing is, FCC. So that's kind of how we do it. Like, so it becomes like this sort of, it's a communication, and there's so much like actual back and forth and conversing about it too, which is weird because it is like based on fucking sick grooves. But we definitely like talk about it. We definitely like write it. Coop has this thing where he like is like to sometimes our own detriment, because I friggin' hate it sometimes, but it's so good. It's like the we can beat this. And so like and
that commitment to quality again.
Commitment to quality to a fucking fault. But it's like it's awesome, man. We just keep going and going and going. Cal is an insane writer, like just an actual writer. So his conceptual ideas are insane. Coop has like this is just a lyricist by trait. So like he can kind of like combine all that sort of stuff too.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. And so then we do that, and then finally, like once all that's done, then we were like, okay, let's see how this sounds together. And then that's when we do all the arrangement stuff and the last minute, like, okay, cool. How does this feel actually with the air moving? And that's kind of like where the shit hits the fan. Is this a good song or not? Happens.
Yeah. I think there's 3 key ingredients to a Record Heat song. You've got groove, cartoonish concepts, and bombast. It needs to have all 3, or it's maybe not one of our A's. Maybe it's one of our B's or C's.
Yeah, definitely. And how has the response been so far to? Is it just called One, or is it like number 1?
I think it's just called One.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the first time we got asked that question. I'm like, yeah. I was like, wait, no, what is it called? It's just One. It's just One. Record Heat 1.
Yeah. How's the response been so far?
Fucking great.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. It's it's always like kind of a challenge when you do something new to have like, everyone says this. We all love the new stuff. And sometimes the fans don't love the new stuff, like a musician always wants to show you the new stuff. And sometimes it's not always like, people aren't always like, that's amazing. That's like, we want the old stuff. But this time around they want the new stuff too. So yeah, we have been lucky in that respect.
I think the challenge is because you want to make sure it's sort of like when you're, I don't know, if you were writing a novel or a screenplay, you don't ever want a plot that wasn't somehow foreshadowed or alluded to earlier in the story. And so I think that when you're putting out new music, you want to make sure that your new stuff is different and it's exciting. It's a new plot point, but it has to make sense. It has to be something that you sort of telegraphed through what's already happened. And I think that we definitely did that on the last record to this new EP. I think that you're getting, it's sort of the next logical step from songs like JFK and Yeah. So it's not out of nowhere, but it is new and it's different and it's fresh. And I think that might be working to our advantage because our fans do seem to be, for the most part, really embracing what we're trying to do and where we're trying to head.
Oh, definitely. And question I got to ask is sometimes there are critics and stuff like that. Even sometimes fans can be critics. Does that affect you guys, like when people are very like overtly critical of like your music or anything like that, or how, does, what I mean?
In what way? It affect us how?
Well, like from a mental health perspective is what I'm saying, because some people take it very personally, and some people are just like, hey, thanks for the click or whatever. Mm-hmm. Did that question make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't feel good to see people say shitty things about your stuff. But you just try not to internalize it, and it certainly has zero impact on creatively what we do. There's no outside influence whatsoever. We're too strong-willed for that.
Well, I thought so. Like early on in the band, I kind of got a kick because early on we were just in a group of insane people, and like I always got a kick out of when like we finished playing, we're all sweaty, we're off the stage, and someone I knew came up to me and was like, or I was like, "What'd you think of the show, man? What'd you think of the show?" And they were like, they're always like, "I don't know." And that is the perfect response, because I mean, like, if you sound like everything else, they're like, "Oh, I get it, cool," or if you sound bad, they're like, "Oh, that was absolute trash." But like, but if they say "I don't know," you made them think they're in there, they're thinking about it. And I remember like the first time I heard it, I was kind of like bummed, and then like the more I hear like stuff like that's like not quite what I expect to hear, the more I think like, oh wait, okay, it's something, you're like creating something new or doing something new, and no one's going to be like immediately like excited about it or like know how to react to something that you've never heard before, so I think that's kind of it turns out to be a plus.
I think our goal is to give the audience, we'd like to leave them in a state of existential crisis. That's how we want to make sure that you're feeling when we walk off stage.
I don't know what's...
I can't remember where we were playing. We were playing with somebody. We were opening for like, I don't know, it might have been with Incubus. It was somebody where the crowd was pretty big, and we finished, and there was sort of confused applause at the end of our set. And I think somebody in like the back just screamed, "What the fuck was that?"
Yeah, this is like in front of like 3,000 people. Yeah, oh man, that was great. I don't think Coop liked that much. He didn't like that. I thought it was funny as hell.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite moments.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think I would rather get a response like that. They get like, if there was like in front of 3,000 people, what you guys said, there was like no applause or just like a sympathy applause or whatever.
Yeah,
the worst. Yeah, to me, as long as like you evoke emotion, I think that's what counts at the end of the day.
Definitely.
I was gonna say, like, that show up in Minneapolis, the crowd was really into it, and Minneapolis is such a hotbed for live music. And I gotta ask you, how much you guys miss being in front of the stage and being in front of people?
I mean, Cal is maybe, I don't know if you're kind of not indifferent, but like, the performance stuff was like whatever. But for me, performance is it. Like I really miss it. I really do. I mean, it's so much fun for me, and it's so much like I don't know. It's the reason, So I do miss it a bunch, for sure.
Yeah, I have a more complicated relationship with performing. It's, to me, I always walk off stage in my own sort of state of existential crisis. Pretty much without fail at the end of every show. I mean, we're talking about mental health, so I'm just sort of a kind of a self flagellating mess. So I don't miss that, but I do. It's still somehow it's an incredibly important part of the process. So even though it's difficult for me, you know, at times it's I don't know. It's like a family member that maybe you don't have a great relationship with, but you miss them all the same. It's like still important, and I am excited to get back up there and start self-flagellating again.
So is
self-flagellating in public. You shouldn't do that. Go.
But you know, you got to get off somehow.
So Cal, is it because like, are you like your own worst critic, you would say, or?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
So
and was that?
I said, so don't even try. I got you beat.
Yeah.
If you want to kiss.
So like in terms of the quarantine, what was the biggest like struggle for you guys? Like, and how did you guys persevere through that struggle?
As a band or as individuals?
Band, individuals, however you want to answer it. Like, first of all, what adjustments have you had to make as a band? And secondly, what adjustments did you have to make within yourself as individuals to adapt?
I think Paul touched on it, what my answer would be earlier in an earlier question. I really feel like touring and the sort of the daily grind and the extreme isolation, the kind of like brutal loneliness, for lack of a better phrase, in a way really prepared us. At least we already kind of knew some of the coping mechanisms for the lockdown lifestyle, I guess.
Sure.
So early on, it actually wasn't. It sort of felt comfortable. It was more later, I think, as the lockdown progressed and the sort of more meta existential symptoms of being of living this way, with everyone else also living this way. That's when it started to kind of get terrifying, you know, because we're not getting any younger, and we're playing music, and it's a tough thing to do. It's hard. The older you get, the harder it is. So I think that ultimately became the biggest challenge for me, was kind of grappling with watching time pass by, and being extremely aware of the fact that, you know, you don't have, it's not indefinite, the amount of time you're given to do this. So.
Absolutely. How about for you, Paul?
I think Cal nailed it. Like earlier on, I mean, like we had just come off tour in January, and so like we were just kind of settling back in. You know, I'd gotten a bartending gig again, and so like all that went away, and I immediately went to my sister's place in North Carolina. So I ended up like just with family for 4 months. So like oddly enough, like the first part of the pandemic was really, I mean, it's an awful thing. Pandemics all be awful. All the death and destruction and isolation is awful. But the first part of me, like just being with family for 4 months, was great. I mean, like it was like, you know, you don't get that opportunity much. And I like basically was just stuck in a house with, you know, a bunch of kids, a couple dogs, and my sister and her husband. And it was actually really good. And somehow in that way, like I found like a really good spot. As time went on and I came back to New York, that it was tough. That was tough too, to like not be able to move forward, not be able to kind of like, you know, I'd like to do things, and not being able to do things all the time is hard. It's just hard, man. And so yeah, in terms of like my mental state though, I guess it's dragging. It was good, and now it's kind of like, okay, I'm fed up. Let's get on with this, you know. So I think that's kind of the thing. I do feel for people that didn't have the training we had, isolation training, you know, like the whatever, like you know, being stuck in solitary. As like initially we call it the span van should actually be named solitary. And 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 so I mean, I hear like, I mean, like, there are people who are stuck in that situation are just, it's not an easy place to be, you know. And so I definitely feel for them and for people that, you know, are struggling with this thing, because it's real, definitely.
Oh, absolutely. So do you think, like, I interviewed a singer-songwriter named Sweet Love yesterday. Mm-hmm. She's out of Los Angeles. And we kind of talked about how, like, concerts could be a paradigm shift from, like, artists just going up there performing to actually it being, like, almost like an outreach. Do you guys see that, like, after the pandemic's over, to be, like, more of an outreach for people? Or do you think we're just going to get back to normal? Or how do you see that?
I mean, I have a couple things. Like, for me, like, I come from, like, punk and hardcore bands back in the day. And so the connection between the community cathartic therapeutic element and music was you know, inescapable. You know, like, you became a punk, or you started doing these hardcore shows because you needed a community, you needed people to help you along, and the music was there as like a nonverbal way of you know, expressing emotion, expressing rage, anger, especially like loneliness, but all these things, you know, and especially being weird, which was important. You know, it's important to have that community. So music for me has always been therapy, and I think it's one of the reasons why I like performing so much. Is that, like, it's like you know, talking in tongues or something. You know, like, you get, like, you know, you just get your demons out, and so while I think it's gonna be huge for when venues open back up. I think it's gonna be huge. Like, people are gonna, like, definitely need that. I mean, it's group therapy. People will come back out. It's gonna be super fun. I think the energy is gonna be great. And I do like the fact that, like, the idea of a venue and a show has expanded. You know, like, you can do all these online shows. You can do whatever. And I think, like, I don't think that's gonna like necessarily go away. But I think people being bereft of live music, being bereft of that time together, I think they've understood how important it is. Maybe it's good. Maybe that's a good thing, because, you know, you don't take it for granted. Hopefully, you know, that's my optimist.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. How about for you, Cal? Do you kind of see it that way too, or like?
Yeah, I love everything Paul just said. I think that's I couldn't say it any better.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of which, have you guys done, like, any live streams or anything like that to promote one, or do you have anything coming up for it?
We did a live stream on October 1st from Sony Hall. That was to promote, well, largely it was to play. It was a way for us to get on stage together again. But also, you know, we had the first single off of one came out in September of last year, Nathan. And so that was kind of part of the sort of new reveal of the new name, the new music. So that was all sort of part and parcel of the same kind of, like, rollout for us. Coming up, I think there's some talk about maybe doing something in the summer, either a drive-in or a live stream. I'm not really sure. I think it's still sort of taking shape. It's a little big right now, but you know, obviously things are so much in flux that it's tough to plan too far ahead.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah, and I love the concept of drive-in concerts for some reason. I just think they're, because I love old school drive-in movies.
Yeah.
Not the steaming up the
like
windows aspect, but I like the history behind it and stuff. So
totally.
Yes, that was a bad joke. But anyways,
wait, what did you say?
Oh, like, I like the drive-in theaters, but not the steaming up windows, you know?
Oh.
Right.
I thought you said something about Biden. I was like, yeah, man, I fuck with Biden. Cool.
Yeah.
I don't know what it has to do with drive-ins. I guess he's old.
Yeah. Well, it's like, for me, I do stand-up comedy part-time, and
nice.
And I just have a very awkward sense of humor. So it just sometimes just comes out like that. And
oh, man. You and Stephen Wright. Come on.
You know what's funny? Like, several people have said, I'm like, one actually compared me to Stephen Wright having an anxiety attack.
Oh my God.
I'm like,
that's brutal. Yeah, no.
Yeah, I'm like, ouch. Do I take that good, or is that bad? It could be good. It could be, I don't know. But anyways, so, like, the Nathan single, take us into that song real quick. what was it written about and stuff like that?
Hey, that one's pretty on the nose. Living in a 4-wheel basement. Was it 2-star 3-year vacation?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the tour. That's the tour life. We actually wrote that. It's funny. That was sort of we wrote that while we were still on Atlantic about when we would no longer be on Atlantic anymore.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. We were.
Yeah. We didn't know.
Prescient.
You're very prescient. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe we manifested that particular. Maybe manifested our own downfall.
I think. I mean, like, it was also. I think it was more generalized than that. I think when we wrote it, kind of, because we definitely had been in the van just busting ass for a long time, and you're like, and still struggling, obviously, to pay rent and all this other stuff too. So like, it's like a, whether you're on a major label or not, some of the fundamental truths of how this business works do not deviate. So
yeah, I mean, for us, a band that's kind of in our echelon, the day to day, even as our profile, elevated a bit, the day to day didn't really change that much. I mean, the life that you're living as a band of our size, you have to, especially now in this sort of new music ecosystem where making money is it's a little harder.
Unfortunately, it is.
You're kind of living the same life, whether you're DIY or indie or sort of a new major label act. So the song we wrote it about the future, we wrote it about our past, we wrote it about our present. It's all encompassing.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And we have just a couple minutes left. So real quick question I'm going to ask you guys is, what is the soundtrack to your life? Whether it's a band, artist, or album that you go to when times get difficult. I'm actually writing a book called Lighthouses in the Darkest Distance. It's going to be due out in 2023.
Oh,
and it's profits are going to National Suicide Prevention Foundation. And basically, I'm just doing it just to raise awareness and stuff. And what soundtrack to your life? Like, it's
soundtrack to our life.
Yeah.
Soundtrack to our life is Record Heat's new EP. It's called One. Most specifically, the new single we just put out called Network. We released the cover is an NFT designed by a great artist named JioSaavn. Is that right?
Is that okay? All right. Is that out of the way? Are you done, Cal? Yeah,
right,
promo. That's the promo.
I'll take the promo.
Oh, wait,
but is there like any band or artist that you go to in your personal life, like when times get difficult? Like for me, the song "Nutshell" by Alice in Chains. When I feel down, I listen to that song. So.
Okay. Easy. Idols. This band called Idols from UK, and it's like, it is a punk band that is insanely good. Like literally, in any context from any generation, it's probably top 3 punk bands of all time, and I really mean that. And not just that, but they I came from DC, and like PMA, like the positive mental attitude shit was like is a way of life, and these guys are so good at that. They're punk. They're getting out this anger, this sort of like this whatever their demons are all coming out, but it's also done in a way that is completely unifying and completely open to all types and creeds. And it's really about love and love of the community and giving love and sharing love. And like, it's crazy to have all those things tied together, because it's a big weird mess of human emotion. And it's really cool. And it's really like, and if you're listening to like punk in the car, so going somewhere and you are feeling stressed or whatever, and you're just screaming into the windshield, it's a great way to get some quick music therapy, for sure.
That's how I practice my
Cal's
music therapy. Hey, Cal,
Cal's
besides
the Eagles.
what's that?
Nice. I said Cal's is the Eagles. I got Idols. Cal's is just the Eagles.
I was trying to decide if I should say the Eagles or not.
Really, the Eagles are?
Well, it's over different phases in my life. I think that question, I would have answered that question differently. I would say now, especially over I think a lot of people, if streaming numbers are to be believed, I think a lot of people have gone through a similar phase as me, where it is classic rock has been a real comfort food for me, particularly over the last year. I've really found myself drawn back into a lot of the stuff that I grew up loving and listening to and learning from. It's still today the stuff I learned the most from by a mile is Springsteen, Petty, the Eagles,
Nice.
Dylan, the Beatles. It's really, it's comfort food almost doesn't really do it service, because that's sort of, if you really care about the craft of it and you're really trying to learn how to be the best writer you can be, you have to look at the greats that came before you. And that's kind of where I've turned when I've felt adrift this year, and really in years prior to this year as well.
Definitely. And for the listeners out there, fans can listen to One by Record Heat on Spotify and all digital streaming platforms. And where else can we find you guys?
YouTube, you can find us. Instagram, we got Twitter, we got it all.
Recordheat.us. Recordheat.us is the website, and then at recordheat.us is some of the socials, but some of the socials have not allowed us to switch yet. So maybe one or two still at Spirit Animal US. Do you know which call?
Not Facebook. Facebook's, oddly enough, the dickhead.
Yeah,
Facebook is the only one.
Yeah, I think that's the main one. I think everybody else is Record Heat US.
Yeah,
so I think we're good on that.
We just got Twitter. I think Instagram is up as Record Heat now. So
awesome.
Record Heat US.
All right, and everybody make sure to follow Record Heat. And thank you so much, guys, for taking time for Madness Creation Podcast. And cheers.
Thanks, brother.
Maddie, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, thank you.